And thank you. Welcome all to the 2020 UNCG McNair Virtual Summer Research Symposium. This is our third panel. We have our scholars who are prepared to share a little bit more about their research and their summer research experience. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, panelists and attendees. My name is Carla Forward. I am the Assistant Director of the McNair Scholars Program at UNC Greensboro. And again, this symposium is an opportunity for our scholars who just completed their Summer Research Institute experience to share more about their summer research, their projects, a little bit about what they learned, a little bit about what they may have reflected on doing differently, or even how they plan on continuing and furthering their research. And just to give some context about the UNCG McNair Scholars Program, we are a TRIO program, a federally funded grant program that supports high achieving students who also identify as first generation and low income students and or students from underrepresented racial identity groups to engage in undergraduate research while also preparing them to pursue PhD degrees. And part of the goal and the mission of the UNC, not only the UNCG McNair program, but all McNair programs, is to engage in undergraduate research. And these scholars did so by participating in the Summer Research Institute, an intensive 8-week experience which pretty much simulates what graduate school PhD programs can and will look like. And they engaged in undergraduate research while also participating in classes that focused on GRE preparation, graduate school application preparation, and a writing seminar around how to write for research in their respective disciplines. And so thank you all again for joining us as attendees are continuing to come in to the call. I will turn it over now to our scholars to begin by introducing yourself. Again, I will ask you to introduce yourself, your name, your year, and your major, and to share a brief description about your research, a brief description about your research topic and your research project over the summer. And I'm adding the question in the chat box for you as panelists. I will start with, I'll go by order this time on who's on my screen. And so I'll start with Rejani.
Hi everyone, I'm Rejani King and I am a women's gender and sexuality studies major, and I'm a senior, and my project is on bridging voice and speculative fiction and Black women writers' takes on surrogacy, identity, and Black feminist theory. And so I looked at race and gender and how Black female experiences and Black culture is portrayed in the literary works that I discussed, and then with surrogacy, not only through motherhood, but the creation of actual stories, and Black feminist theory, and the discussions of disability studies, and also within the different images of Black women that we've seen throughout history and in literary works themselves.
Thank you. How about Scholar Jessica?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica, and I am a senior, and I am also a women's gender and sexuality studies major. I decided to look at queer consciousness and the representation of queer women in young adult contemporary literature. So I essentially looked at how the representation was being presented through like the themes that were in the novels and how those were overlapping, but also looking at how queer consciousness and this like awareness of like your queer identity played a role into how those themes were portrayed and how that impacted the representation we saw, whether that was like positive or negative.
Thank you. Scholar Cody.
Hi, my name is Cody Scercy. I'm a senior. I'm a religious studies major, and my project was Messianic Judaism, a survey of nationalism, race, and religion. So I analyzed 3 ethnographies on Messianic Jewish communities and kind of analyzed the ways in which nationalism, race, and religion have all contributed to the emergence and the formation of Messianic Judaism, and how that changes the American Jewish narrative and changing kind of the effects of anti-Semitism and the role of Christian Zionism and philo-Semitism in the American political narrative.
Thank you. Next, Scholar Malanah.
Hi, my name is Malanah. I'm an upcoming senior. My major is art history, and my research involved, I focused on the works of Italian Mannerist artist, 16th century Italian Mannerist artist, Rosso Fiorentino, and these stylistic changes over the course of his career while in Italy. And for my research, I argued that these stylistic changes were prompted by personal relationships through family and artists, as well as professional connections, rather than solely requests from patrons and contemporary stylistic trends.
Thank you. Next, Scholar Kiara.
Hello, my name is Kiara Bethune, and I'll be a senior here at UNC Greensboro, and my major is fashion design. So for my research, I did I wanted to research how has Instagram influence and its audience influence fashion influencers in the way they perceive themselves. So through this research, I at first started studying how through technology and through the importance of retail industry, how important fashion influencers are, and then moved on to the role as an influencer and how that affects their actual mental health through the self-perception of the way they think the world perceives them instead of the way they actually perceive themselves. So through that, I was able to find a lot about how much fashion influencers and their job really affects them personally. And I just wanted to have more discussion and start discussion about social media and what it can do to influencers.
Thank you. Next, Scholar Jasmine.
Hi, my name is Jasmine Kessler. I'm a senior this year, psychology major, and my research was on millennial money, which hones in on first-generation student status, employment, and academic achievement. So in our study, we focused on if working in college is associated with higher or lower GPAs and academic achievement. And we hypothesized that working in college would be associated with lower GPAs. And due to our understanding that if you're working, you're not dedicating all the time necessary needed to really focus on your studies and really focus on the hours needed to be successful in your degree and attaining your degree. So yes, that's what mine is on.
Thank you. And Scholar Jade.
Hi, I'm Jade Johanna Boone. I'm a sociology major and with a concentration in criminology, and I'm a senior this year. During the 8-week process, I focused my research study on Eurocentric standards and how that affects African American women. I titled it White to the Bone, being that Black women are kind of put in a world where they have to be taught Eurocentric values of beauty and how that affects them, their cosmetics, their body appearance, and even the way that they wear their hair, and how that impacts their lives as a whole, and how big corporations such as L'Oreal, Vanity Fair play a role in harming Black women's growth and fulfilling their beauty.
Thank you all, and thank you for sharing a snapshot of your research. As a reminder for our attendees, in the chat box, I will share a link to our website where you can see our scholars' full presentations. So for this panel discussion, our scholars will not represent all of the details about their research. They will talk a bit about it through the questions that we've prepared for them. But you definitely have the opportunity to check out our website that I've included in the chat box and see YouTube links and YouTube videos of our scholars talking a little bit more in depth about their research projects. So what we will do now is, I do have a few questions for the scholars to talk a little bit about what they learned, what surprised them, you know, what they may have done differently, and based on what they learned and their reflections, what they plan on doing moving forward. We will talk about these questions, and I ask you as attendees to start thinking about what questions you have for our scholars. And after we engage in a panel discussion, you're invited to ask your questions in the Q&A section or include them in the chat box. Okay, so scholars, our next question is, what did you learn about your topic during SRI? You all kind of went into the summer research with a topic. Some of you have, already started a little bit of your research. What did you learn during that 8-week experience? And perhaps what also surprised you as you were conducting research? I will start with, we'll go in alpha order by first name, and I'll start with Cody.
So I think one of the most interesting things in terms of what I've learned is about the evolution of concepts. And so one of the things that really stuck out to me was the development of the Judeo-Christian narrative, and how the term Judeo-Christian kind of emerged as a way to describe Jewish converts to Christianity, and then was utilized by the academic world to describe first century Jewish Christians. It then kind of took on this politicized notion of being like this unified Jewish Christian identity in which Jews and Christians had like a shared sense of history, shared values and morals, and also kind of created this unified identity in which the American kind of nationalist identity was based out of a Judeo-Christian sense of self. And really now the world of religious studies has moved away from terms like Judeo-Christian, which is really interesting because I think it has left us bereft of a term to describe first century Jewish Christians in a way that is really understanding of their identities as Jews and Christians simultaneously, and the evolution of the Jewish and Christian sense of self in relation to one another, to each community.
Thank you. Next, Jade. What did you learn and what surprised you?
Well, I can say during this 8 weeks, I learned a lot, but like what was more surprising for me is that the first 4 weeks, I had nothing to write. I was just so unmotivated and I didn't know anything to talk about. And then, with the movement and things happening in our lives, it reflected what I wanted to study. And it was like, the timing was perfect because corporations are now speaking up for, Black inclusion. And so with that, doing my research, it became more easier because at first I felt lost, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to write? And so with doing my research, I was able to analyze more papers that were closer to now, and people were able to, resonate what I wrote and what I studied, speaking about racism, speaking about colorism being implemented into the Black community by Eurocentric standards, and how that affected light-skinned women compared to dark-skinned complexion women. And so with that, I was able to analyze and break down how I wanted to divide and speak up for both light-skinned women, with me being a light-skinned woman, and also being the voice of dark-skinned women who's not allowed to speak on their, I don't even know how to say it, but like to speak on the role that they're not allowed to play simply because of the complexion of their skin. So I thought that was pretty cool to learn, and it really made me want to like look more in depth into it.
Yeah, that's awesome when contemporary times help highlight certain things with the research that you're doing and just starts to reveal some new information. How about Jasmine? What did you learn? What perhaps surprised you about your study?
So during this 8 weeks, I was definitely constantly reminded about how the research process is not linear. It started off one way and moved into a different direction, and it was a constant ebb and flow of my ideas and then, you know, what I was finding in my research and then re-merging those things into one solid form. I went in with this idea that, you know, our hypothesis was that if you're working, then that's going to affect your GPA. But then I also felt like that would be even more difficult for first generation students because they don't have that background of, you know, having a family member that could give them more advice and give them, you know, a better understanding of being in a university and then, you know, the responsibilities that are required to, you know, attain your GPA and also, you know, get your degree. And we found that it was bad for everyone. It wasn't just bad for first generation students. And of course there was limitations to our study, but I think that was the most surprising. And then going back to the research process not being linear was helpful in like solidifying that understanding of our finding and then bringing that forth into my conclusion.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Jasmine. How about Jessica?
I think something that, well, I think this was like the biggest thing that I learned during my project. I didn't go into it with this idea of queer consciousness and looking at how important it was. It was something that I like discovered like halfway through the second book I was reading. And I just didn't realize how important it was that one of the main reasons, well, hold on, let me backtrack. One of the more important parts of creating positive representation is by having the characters be consciously aware of their identities that they hold, but like, so not just like your queer identity, but like also your like race and gender and class all play roles into that, how you're perceived as a queer person. And I think that's something that really became like the heart of my paper, like toward the end was like, this is one of the ways that creating positive representation like became valuable, mainly because like you don't know who your audience is for when you're readings, but like because like as a queer person, like when I read queer novels, they're mainly for comfort, but if I was straight, I learn a lot from those books. So yeah, that was like something that I learned, but something that really surprised me during the research was like so there's like this concept called own voices, which is where like if a queer woman writes a book, she writes like a queer woman character. And it shocked me that just because a book is own voices doesn't necessarily mean it's positive representation, which was actually something that like made me really upset at first, but then it was something that I had to like dissect, and I learned that through this idea of queer consciousness. And yeah, so I think that was like the most surprising part, because when it does come to own voices novels, we automatically assume it's positive representation, but that's not always the case. And I think that's something that's really important when we look at like literature specifically.
Thank you. Thank you for those reflections. So to Jasmine's point, not only is research not linear and can take so many different directions, as you delve deeper, you start learning more and new themes or other directions starts to reveal themselves as you conduct your studies. Kiara.
All right, so things that I've learned. This was an experience because last year I was actually in the SRI, and I was mainly focusing on how I wanted to research how much Instagram has impacted the dress of a fashion influencer, and how because of the presence on Instagram, they may dress nicer or have more of the more trendier styles versus without Instagram. So that's what I was going into at first. However, through going around and like reviewing what I previously researched, I was starting to kind of divert from that first path, and it shocked me how much, as I started my research, how much fashion influencers are really on the trends. So I used one of the common trend forecasting companies to do like a mood board for the year 2018, and that's the year that I looked at. And as I researched the different posts from the Instagram posts of my 3 influencers, they were like right on spot with a lot of the trends that were going on. And some of the trends that I've seen from the 2018 mood board were actually still trends that people wear now. So it's just really interesting to see how fashion influencers can really put their money, like sacrifice a lot to do this job. It's not just being, having like a clout on Instagram.
Am I frozen or? Okay, are we back on? So that was, I apologize. I guess my system was having some technical difficulties because my screen just shut down. So I think we're back on. I see all of our attendees are back on. Kiara, at least for me, you were midway through your point. So hopefully you can finish, or if you can just restate some of your main points.
Okay, yeah. I don't know what you may have not heard, but basically I was just saying one of the most exciting things that I learned that really surprised me was as I was researching with like one of the trend forecasting companies in the year 2018, a lot of the trends that I seen were actually the trends that the fashion influencers were buying and actually posting about. So it just shocked me how much work and sacrifice fashion influencers put into their job, and how it's sometimes it can just be seen as someone wanting to have a presence on Instagram and nothing more. But it really shocked me how much they're really like focusing on staying on trend and knowing that that is one of the biggest parts of their job and really being able to stay with that every year. So just like how they have to maybe sacrifice finances to make sure that they are on trend is really, it was really cool to see that.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience, like research shifts, technology shifts. Rejani, if you can share, what did you learn and perhaps what surprised you?
So what I learned was just the overall creative process of writing, um, especially like within the speculative fiction genre, and being a black um, a black writer who is a woman, and just inserting my own experiences and just different things that affect me as a black woman, and so just learning also how these writers have articulated that themselves. And so something that surprised me was just how much this conversation, especially within speculative fiction, there is the big theme of Black futurity. And, imagining, Black people in the future. And, right now within our current, state of our country and our world, um, especially with, Black Lives Matter, the police murdering of Black people, in the words of Naylor Hopkinson, being able to imagine ourselves in the future is pretty radical. And, to see ourselves in that setting and, just be able to tell others, you know, through literary works, you know, our lives matter, our voices matter, our experiences need to be valued, and so do our futures.
Wow, wow, thank you. Thank you all for capturing your reflections. You know, that's a part of the research process, learning new elements as you all are continuing to contribute and produce new knowledge. So with that in mind, we recognize that it was an intensive 8-week experience. You were in, oh, sorry, somebody right, I apologize. Malanah, you didn't go. I apologize, Malanah. Can you share what you learned and what surprised you?
So for my research, what I learned regarding my actual research my research in general, my research experience, I learned that, well, for me personally, the most difficult part of my research was finding a topic. And in that, my mentor was so amazing, and she helped me like figure out like if something's actually possible or something's actually realistic, or is this already been done, or like how do you want to approach everything. So that was mostly like the first 4 weeks was just figuring out the topic and then how important how much work and how much time and like how important just the topic itself is. Like the bulk of the research, at least for art history, we have to find a topic and then we research and then we write. So find that topic technically is our research, and then we find the time and then we research to fill in the gaps of what we like of what we actually want, what our argument is. So I think that was really interesting. And then after like figuring out, I realized how much freedom I've had since it is my own personal research. So it's that sense of freedom where it's like, okay, if something doesn't work out, I can just change it and find something else, and kind of like a puzzle piece where like you're just fitting in the pieces and see like which route works, and see if this information, if there's some type of connection, or if anything, or seeing like if some information fits and what doesn't fit, and then if there's like, and there's a lot of pieces fitting together, like okay, this is starting to become an actual like actual research. And I found that really interesting, and it really lightened me. It was like sense of, oh, I actually control this. Like no one else is controlling this research because it is my own personal research. And I think that really helped me like focus on it and try. And then it was also really exciting to like create something new and create something to like explore something that hasn't been done yet, or we're trying to find something that has been done yet. So just kind of doing a puzzle, just trying piecing out like, could this work? And then when it finally all works, you're like, oh, this does work. This is amazing. I've actually found this new route that hasn't been done or has been done in the way I've done it. So that was really interesting. And then regarding my actual topic, I realized how similar artists in the 16th century are similar to artists today, and how the art world and the sewing communities are all very small. So everyone, like if you go to New York, if you go to Miami, or if you go to like Los Angeles, their artist community, they all know of each other artists, or they've all been in some type of contact with one another in that general over circle. So in Italy, it's a cultural artistic hub, but all artists are all in exchange with each other, or all in the same type of patron bubble, or like leader political dominance or religious dominance. They're all kind of conversating with each other and dialogue with each other. And so for me, it was like, oh, that's kind of today, like each artist are feeding off each other, contemporary artists feeding off past artists, contemporary artists feeding off present artists also. And during that time, and Italian artists are also doing the exact same thing. They're taking pieces, especially for Rosso Fiorentino. He took pieces from different artists that he saw and liked, and then he created his own distinct style that was original and innovative compared to all the other ones, which made him so intriguing today. So it's interesting to see those parallels between contemporary artists today and like 16th century artists, and then how small the artistic world is, and how each of the artists feed and like kind of help each other artistically, creatively, and it's a very collaborative space.
Thank you. So although times are different from centuries to now, and maybe even mediums and genres are different in art world, there's kind of like some overlap in this idea of like community and this artistic community space. Thank you. And thank you for your patience, and I apologize, Malanah, for skipping over you. As we go into our next question, you thought a bit about what you learned and what surprised you. I want you to share your reflections on what would you have done differently had circumstances been different. We recognize we are in the midst of a pandemic. For those watching this video, our scholars engaged in summer research in unique circumstances, being remote and virtually, where the original experience was meant to be on campus with access to libraries, more people, more spaces, more resources. So as you think about your summer experience, as you think about your research, what you learned, what perhaps would you have done differently had circumstances been different? And even if other elements were different, like you perhaps had more research funding, if that applies to your research, if you had more time over more than 8 weeks, more manpower. Some folks may have wanted to work within research teams or within communities. So as you think about Magic Wand, if circumstances, resources were different, unlimited, what would you have done different with your research? I'll go in order to not skip anyone. I'll go in order in how you all are appearing on my screen. And I'll start with Jessica.
I think like if I could do something differently, I think I would have really liked more time, just because I am someone like during the whole research process, I was like, oh, but this thing, like we could talk about this thing, but then that would require like more research. But I think like overall I would have liked more time, because then I think I could have analyzed more novels, which I think would have given a more holistic view. Like in a perfect world, I probably would have looked at like some of the earlier queer women novels and then compared them to some of the more recent queer novels that were published, which is what I primarily focused on in this research. And of course, I would have liked to be like in a library and on campus, and that all would have been really nice.
Thank you. How about you, Cody?
Yeah, I think in a non-COVID world, research would have gone drastically differently. And so my original intention was to do an ethnographic study and kind of work one-on-one with Messianic Jewish communities doing interviews. And I think that probably would have been a more ideal method. I did really enjoy reading the ethnographies that I analyzed, but I think with any kind of published work, much of the analysis was already done in the ethnography. And so I think it would have been beneficial hearing the perspectives and stories of Messianic Jews from Messianic Jews, from the voices of Messianic Jews. I think it's really important to have underrepresented kind of community speak from their own experience. And I think that would have been very beneficial. Also, I think one of the things that I would have done differently is kind of focus on. So one of my interviewees was Dr. Michael Brown, who recently wrote 2 books about Donald Trump. One is called Donald Trump is Not My Savior, and the other is called Evangelicals at the Crossroads. And so both books kind of analyze how Messianic Jews have historically been conservatives and how they have really aligned with evangelical Christians and the religious right on conservative issues, but how the presidency of Donald Trump has kind of been a divisive issue. And so I would have been really interested in kind of seeing how that played out in terms of evangelicals and Messianic Jewish relations.
Thank you. How about you, Jade? What would you have done differently?
Well, differently, if we were in person, well, honestly, I wouldn't change the experience because for me personally, the experience helped me build character and knowing that I know how to advocate for myself, whether I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm uncomfortable. And like with especially talking about Black women and how like they're silenced by, everybody else. And I felt like, writing this gave me more power to use my voice and saying, I don't like this, I'm not gonna continue to deal with it. Or if I don't like the way like treatment and things like that. So I would say personally, I wouldn't change anything. However, if we were in person, I do feel like I could have reached out more to other people that allowed me to create better connections and more people to rely on, because it wasn't until probably my 6th week of research that I finally found somebody that was kind of understanding of what I wanted and what did I like, the vision that I had for my research. And so by then I had 6 weeks of built up anger and like depression from the fact that I felt like I wasn't going anywhere with my research. So I would say if we were in person, I feel like I would have had having a face-to-face connection with someone is way different than doing it virtually. Because virtually it's kind of like, I don't understand where you're coming from. You don't understand where I'm coming from. But sitting down in person, we're able to say, this is this and this is what I want. So I would say that would be my only thing that I would change or do differently.
Yeah, trying to shift to the dynamics of virtual world versus in-person world can affect the process. How about you, Kiara?
So, unlimited resources. I definitely would have taken advantage of going to meet the influencers. I think just getting a behind the scenes of what they have to do in their job and what it all entails would be definitely a benefit to my research, just to see the behind the scenes stress and preparedness as well, of what they may have to do to create that one post that everybody loves, or even prepare creative styles, or even the partnerships that they have to have with brands. So just being able to share light on the behind the scenes, I think would have been really cool. Could have eventually been like a documentary, I think, to help people understand that it's just more than what they may see on Instagram, and that it is an actual job. And I think that's something that I've just been like really passionate about, is just seeing how everybody can just throw around the word influencer, but actually like the people that chose this as a job, they are able to find ways to actually like motivate themselves and also like get I think connections with different brands so that they can advertise certain products and things of that nature. So just being able to like share more of their experience.
Thank you. Jasmine.
So yeah, I think time would definitely be my first restraint, living in a world where a week feels like 72 hours, not feeling like you have enough time to do everything, even though it's still the same amount of time, which is really weird. I think also having the resources available as well. I think this experience made me realize how much I took the library for granted. And being in a space where I have access to the literature, even though it's online, nothing I feel like substitutes having like a book and having like, archives that you have access to help you further develop your research idea. My original research was actually on John Gottman's Four Horsemen model, which were the 4 concepts of relationships that end relationships. So it was criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And my library mentor actually put me on to The Science of Truth, which was a text by John Gottman that I got from the library. And I didn't realize our library had so much John Gottman material. And so, not being able to have access to that, and then also not being able to have access to the text message data, which is in the psychology department, kind of threw off things a little bit, but I am grateful that this experience helped me adapt to change. And like I said, going with the ebb and flow of research not being linear. because that's life, you know, things change and sometimes you just have to just go with it. So I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. And we're gonna do this again, but I'm sure our library friends appreciated that shout out in wishing the library was accessible over the summer. Rejani, can you share what would you have done differently?
Something I'd have done differently, and if I had unlimited resources, the biggest thing is time. Um, just there was one book that I really wanted, you know, to include in my research, but I couldn't because of time being a factor. But I would say like that's the biggest thing, just having enough time to be able to do that and kind of dive into, you know, other avenues of, you know, my topic as well and the themes that I highlighted. And also, you know, in a non-pandemic environment, uh, being able to have the library again as well, because I do love a library environment. So being able to have access to, you know, all different types of sources and research, that would be my biggest.
Thank you. And how about you, Malanah?
So in a non-COVID world, well, before COVID, I was planning on studying abroad in Florence, Italy, where the artworks of my artists are in situ. So they're in the original locations, or they're in museums in Florence, Italy. So I think if COVID's not happened, actually seeing the artworks like in person would have really gave me a more personal connection, because right now I'm already attracted to the aesthetic qualities of my artist's work. But I think everything's happening with the protests and the racial climate, it was really distracting trying to like focus on Italian artists, but also focus on areas happening in my work also. So I think seeing the artwork, like being in front of me, being able to like really fully encompass the environment of like, or being in that environment of where these artists were creating, where this space was collaborative, where like all these influence and creativity was just flourishing, and then actually seeing the artwork like right in front of me, to where like this is the product of that environment. I think that really would have aided my actual like research and having that like deeper connection to it. And also definitely library would have been really amazing. I know that was a big struggle for my research, just having the lack of resources. Because I remember that like there will be some books where I wish I could grab or like have, but it was like my mentor did an amazing job of giving me everything, all my books that I could possibly have. But I know it would have been an easier, I wouldn't say easy, but it would have been I would have had more resources will allow me to like kind of help me like navigate my research more. So.
Definitely. If it's not apparent, definite shout out and appreciation to library mentors and library staff, and recognizing the significance of having access to primary sources plays in research and conducting studies. So you've thought a bit about not only your research topic and what you've learned and what surprised you, and perhaps some things that you would have done differently as circumstances would have presented themselves differently. I invite you to respond to this next question as you think about next steps, as you think about, and I believe it was Jasmine who used the language of adapting or adjusting, as you think about how you plan on moving forward with research, your particular study, or perhaps new lines of inquiry based on what you learned. What are some of your plans moving forward with your research? And before answering this question, I want to give our attendees time to start thinking about questions you have for our panelists. After they respond to this question, I will invite a Q&A and engagement with our scholars and the attendees. So I will go, and I have a list beside me, so we will go in alpha order by last name. And again, scholars, what are your plans moving forward with your research after SRI? And Kiara, if you can start us off.
So with SRI, I have been thinking, because it's also my senior year, so trying to figure out what type of programs with like fashion design I may want to do, and also using this research to maybe even use some of that information that I've learned to try and incorporate that into like a collection I possibly have thought about. I think we've talked before about different things with like the way people may wear suits and how that identifies them as more powerful. So maybe looking at different types of photos and trends that the fashion influencers wore, and maybe like analyze the captions and how they were able to encourage their audience to be more hopeful or more powerful or more confident versus like other things. So that, I think that's been something that I've thought about. And also in the honors college, that could be something that I could do for my honors project. So that's just been something that I've thought about. And more of like the psychology side that I've been thinking about as well with the research is how much technology did affect the influencers. And like in my research, I was sharing how some of the influencers at first, they had a very like influencer and people that would just follow them randomly, versus now they have a strong connection with their audience. So seeing how their influence changed from them being an influencer to how their audience started to influence them in the ways they would post because they knew this was their audience, versus beforehand, they were just posting to gain a presence. So maybe just learning more about that and seeing how other influencers could get tips from people that have made it bigger and like bigger audiences, and actually teach others how to gain their audience with certain captions, certain feeds, and things like that. So those are some ways that I've definitely just thought, okay, now that I've done this, what could I do more and like learn more about? So, but I think overall, my research was just wanting to shed light on how much social media has influenced us personally, and just being able to take that into a greater discussion. I think that was like the main idea of this research, is being able to see that social media, it does have an addictive personality when it comes to always wanting to have instant gratification with likes and things of that nature, and just seeing how that did affect the influencers. So just having that conversation as well is like my main goal from all of this.
Thank you. How about you, Jade? What are some of your plans moving forward?
Well, moving forward, I can say this has been an experience, but it wasn't until I can say to like my 7th or 8th week where I actually began to say, I think I like doing research and I like being able to analyze, especially I feel like Black women and Black men do not have a voice in America. So my whole goal in career-wise is to be able to be that voice for the minority community in America when it comes to bigger corporations. And so with everything, with finishing up, I began to realize like, hey, I got something else that I would like to research before I was even done with my Black women. And I wanted, because initially beginning McNair, I had wanted to talk about mass incarceration of African-American men. But at the time, I felt like that was mediocre. Everybody knows it. Everybody understands the pipeline from school to prison. So I was like, let's try something let's try something different. And so once I began wrapping up, an idea came to me, and I'm planning on doing a research entitling it The Price of Black Bodies. And I'm talking about like environmental racism and sociological theories that affects Black men specifically, and how their community either is going to lead them to prison or jail, and how prison or like to the grave, and how just society creates and like focuses on Black men, especially when it comes to news outlets and social media, movies, and things like that. And so with that, I want to work with like a sociology, especially who focuses criminology, a sociology professor that allows me to use my narrative and be the voice of my research. And so that's what I plan on doing. I want to honestly work more with the paper that I just finished with the sociology mentor also, so we can go ahead and get that focused, because I would love to be published and work on something like that. So that's all.
Awesome. Definitely publishing being the great next step. Who do I have next? Jessica.
My plans like moving forward, I definitely realized I really like humanities research. And so while I'm like applying to grad schools, like luckily the grad programs I am applying to, except for one, they're pretty like open to humanities research, because like I am applying to WGSS program. So like the field like in general is very interdisciplinary. But it's but also like the research that I did this past summer, it's kind of put me in a tough bind, because now I'm like stuck between really wanting to do humanities research, but mainly focusing on like literature and English and stuff like that, or like international studies. And I'm trying to like think of ways to like merge the two. But it definitely, like, this experience has definitely solidified that I love doing research, and I really, really want to continue doing it. And like, I just want to like keep like contributing to conversations that are happening in the humanities field, because I think that's one of the greatest things about humanities is like we're not here to like find a solution, we're here to like contribute to discussions that are going on or start discussions. And yeah, so those are my plans moving forward, is grad school and continuing research.
Good deal. And I would imagine you have some folks in your life, maybe even some folks on this call, that can help you think through and talk through how to merge those different interests into not only a potential research topic or field, which is the exciting piece about conducting and engaging in undergraduate research and starting to ask those questions. Malanah, some of your next steps moving forward with your research.
So for my research, I don't plan to go any further with this current topic, but I do plan on hopefully in the upcoming semester, in spring semester, if like conferences or other symposiums are happening virtually, I will love to present my topic in that event. I know I will hope, for sure in the undergraduate research symposium, that's something that I know will probably, since they did it last year virtually, and then hopefully honor symposium is still happening. And then I don't know if it's called Snickers, but it's the Southern Conference. I want to hopefully that one's being held again, but just trying to see if there's any options to present my topic. I'm going to seek out and present. And then when it comes to like future research, I'm going to use, because I've learned so much over this whole process of just doing my due diligence and like researching what is out there in my topic, see if it's already been done, and then finding those holes to see what is missing. So this upcoming semester, I'll be conducting independent study to produce my honors thesis. So I am going to be focused on Black portraiture artists and seeing how hopefully just this journal on top of just like looking into like how that encapsulate like the Black narrative and Black representation, and then just seeing if there's any type of relation or seeing so much back to like the Black arts movement in like Harlem back during the 60s to see like, so just these are all general ideas, but I'm going to use like my research, like what I've learned, and how to like really narrow it down and really pinpoint and really taking that patience and time and focus to like narrow down to narrow down exactly what to find that gap. And then after completing my research, I'm like even more excited to like, I thought I was be like, all right, another research thesis, like I don't know if I can do it, but just after finishing this topic, I'm just like, all right, next one, like what's the next topic? Because like now I'm like so thoroughly like I have so much knowledge about like Renaissance art that I'm just so excited. I'm so glad that I went this whole process. Now I have that in my pocket, so now I want to like do that for my next topic and just really dive deep into what I want to learn and just like be able to like discover and have that knowledge also. So I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to doing my independent study in this upcoming fall semester.
For sure, and you will be encouraged and supported to not only further, but to present. That is something that we are excited to support you all on, in finding those conferences, which will happen and will continue virtually to share with the world the great work that you're starting and continuing. So look out for that, Malanah. Be careful what you ask for. Jasmine, what are some of your ideas, plans moving forward with your research?
So moving forward, I was originally, like I said, supposed to do John Gottman's Four Horsemen model, but my mentor was actually the one that suggested that I pick a topic that's more relative to my career path, which is HR management. So that's how we got on the topic of millennial money, and how employment, affects academic achievement or doesn't affect academic achievement. So I think going forward, I have realized that this research has helped me get over my fear of numbers. I just feel like numbers have no soul, and it's very difficult to understand things sometimes. But this process really, really helped me face that fear. And, through it all, I realized that it really wasn't that bad. And so I think that that's a start, especially with the career path that I'm going into, because there will be more numbers. They're not going to go anywhere. And so with that said, I do think I want to take that concept of how employment affects XYZ and apply that to something else in the future, because it is, a foundational aspect of everyone's life, financial stability and capitalism and everything that comes with that. But then outside of my research, I think my next focus now is graduating in the fall, and then talk of numbers. I'm taking like one of the hardest psychology classes right now, Psych 310, if anybody knows, So, that I think goes hand in hand with that, but I'm optimistic about everything.
Thank you, Jasmine. I think you're making a lot of quantitative research methodologists excited when you say you want to go deeper into numbers. How about you, Rejani?
So a big part of my intention when I first started doing this research was to continue the conversation about my topic, because especially like within the speculative fiction genre, it can be very white. So, just highlighting Black authors, Black women authors, and, just being able to uplift their voices and, again, continue that conversation. So my plans moving forward are, Dr. Morissette, my faculty mentor, she told me that some people at UNCG, also within the English discipline, are kind of doing some similar research that I am doing within my topic. So just seeing like how they're doing it, taking it from different perspectives, and how I could also do that in the future, whether that's through a different avenue or just with the things that I've already started researching. And then also to present at a conference in the future. That would be an incredible, opportunity to be able to do that, to actually continue that conversation. And also creative writing was a big part of my research. So I wrote a short story, and so being able to finish that, and then also having that as another piece to go with my graduate applications as I'm applying to those programs in the fall. So that's my plan moving forward.
Good deal. Thank you. And Cody, some of your ideas, thoughts, plans moving forward with your research.
So I did find a lot of interesting things about my topic. I think like for me, it's something that I'm interested in, but it's hardly like my magnum opus. So I don't think like looking at Messianic Jews in an American narrative was really interesting. Moving forward, I would really like to see the flip side of that. And so Israel has a law of return, which allows anyone that has at least one Jewish grandparent to be a naturalized Jewish citizen. But I found out through my research that Messianic Jews, because they religiously identify as Christians, are ineligible for citizenship in Israel under the law of return, even if they are considered ethnically Jewish, which was really interesting. And so I would like to learn more kind of about the development of that. And one of the ethnographies that I read actually talked a lot about like this secretive, covert operation to like have Messianic Jews make Aliyah, which is becoming Israeli citizens without disclosing their religious affiliation. And so I thought that that was really interesting, and I would really like to see kind of the flip side of that, like outside of an American context. However, I think that the ethnographies I read also like brought up a lot of questions for me for future research. And so I was really interested in Daniel Bordes's book called Israel, The Story of a Nation Reborn. And so he talks a lot about the role of poetry, distinctively Jewish poetry, and how Hebrew in a vernacular secular context kind of arose first in the form of Hebrew poems, which really gave this sense of renewed Jewish self, renewed Jewish kind of ethnic pride post-Holocaust. And so I would be really interested in researching kind of the role of poetry, both in the revitalization of Hebrew and in kind of the development of Zionism. And then also I would be really interested back in an American context to research evangelical Christian Zionism, which I kind of like read a lot about in the ethnographies, but more for the purposes of like creating background for the development of Messianic Judaism. But I would really be interested in the ways in which kind of Israel comes to the forefront of US politics as a political stance, as well as the evangelical support of the occupation in Israel.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. One thing that I feel like I gathered hearing all of you is that not only can research look different across disciplines, but how you plan to act on them, how they may inform not only your research endeavors, but even your careers can look very differently as well. So kudos to you. Now is the time. Attendees, are there any questions from the virtual audience for our scholars? Okay, I see one question. Panelists, you can see this. We have this from Dr. Noel Morissette. All of you have addressed the subject that involves image making, whether art, historical or speculative, but also commercial and political. Is there a way to talk about image making as a significant research topic in this moment? It is a useful way of telling a narrative of someone or something. Did you find this focus to be a helpful research tool all on its own, or did you find it needed to be developed into a methodology? If so, how did you do this, or would you do this? So really great question, Dr. Morissette. Thoughts around this idea of image making? You see there's multiple questions in the chat box. There's multiple questions to that huge question. Reflections or responses to this question?
I know for me, like my research dealt a lot with kind of this idea of image making. And so to reference again, Daniel Gordis's book, Israel, the Story of a Nation Reborn, they talk a lot about the ways in which Zionism created this narrative of a new Jew that was created in contrast to the image of the old Jew. That of the European Jew who was very studious, kind of seen as weak, and also effeminate. And so that's why you now have conscription in Israel, which is mandatory military service, as well as kind of this birth of labor Zionism, in which Israel was kind of founded on these agricultural farming communities. And that was all in reaction to kind of attempting to forge an image of a new Jew that was in contrast to the European image. In terms of Messianic Judaism, I think really pivotal to understanding its development is the racialization of Jews in America and the ways in which both externally and internally Jews began to be seen as a race. So yeah.
Thank you, Cody.
I think for my research, image making started, I was able to research more about it from the knowledge that I knew from like retail, and then also just doing more research within how the brands, so with brands, they recently in the past couple of years, they've started to be more transparent with what they stand for, and like maybe with sustainability, or as we've seen now, like within the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. So they've been able to use their fashion influencers to be more of a face of their transparency, whether it can be the way that they style their clothing to be more athletic versus more classy, or even like the message that they may put with their brand influencers, or even the race of their brand influencers. So things like that, I think I've definitely learned more from doing this research, but also I've had a little bit of prior knowledge from that. And then I think just moving forward, another aspect of image making that I talked about was just like with a collection, being able to see like how the media can portray different feelings and different encouraging, I think like encouraging moods versus how people may like portray themselves on social media versus how they may actually be feeling. So being able to see like through clothing and through media, what are ways that people identify themselves as confident or identify themselves as shy and things of that nature. So that's been something that I've been really excited to dive into more of. But I think to answer your question, those are two ways that I can kind of see image making within my research.
So for me, from an art historical perspective, image making, especially regarding like as a useful way to tell a narrative or of something or someone, art itself is a great example of how artists are expressing themselves by showing in a way either to like reference what's happening around them or to tell their own personal story, their own personal truth. So for example, I'm located in Greensboro, North Carolina, and during this moment of the protest in downtown Greensboro, there's a street, our main street, where there's murals on the storefronts of a bunch of on the storefronts, and that right there is like they are documenting the moment of they're documenting their emotions, what they're feeling, or what they see, or what they hear through art, and showing that to the general public. And I talked to those artists, and what they created was what at the moment of time of what they're feeling. So it's their narrative of what they believe or what they thought, what they feel from what was happening around them. So art itself is it's a useful tool to look into show to really to, and I believe that it is a very it's a very helpful way. It's a very I want to say easy way, but it's a way to it reaches a broader audience to know like what is happening in the world, and like when people see art, they'll understand exactly what was happening. So to have that documented in a public space is a great way to show like what is happening. We need to speak on what is happening, or wow, this art is about what is happening. So automatically gets that dialogue happening, whether it's something personal or something that's happening in like our society currently.
Thank you. I think it's fair. Can we move on to another question, friends? Question from Jenny. What's one piece of advice? What's one piece of advice would you give to an incoming McNair scholar?
Embrace the process of not knowing. Oh my gosh, like last year, even I think Jade was talking about it, like how emotional and personally connected you can get to not being where a lot of other scholars may be within their research, and how that can just affect you and sometimes just doubt yourself, with us already being minorities, or even like, just being unrepresented in the first place. And sometimes we can just get in our heads and not allow ourselves to go through this process of, okay, I don't know anything, but when I come out of it, I'll have a lot that I've learned and grown from. So just being able to not be too intimidated by the process of when you may not have any idea or clue of what to do, or where your topic may be going. So just being able to embrace that and not being too hard on ourselves would be some advice to give.
For me, I think some advice would come from be you, like be yourself. You know what works for you. You know what best fits you. Don't allow someone else to tell you how you're going to conduct your research or your response to certain things. And you just have to know, like, at the end of the day, you have to understand what works best for you, what topic best reflects your values and what you want. So, like, my whole entire advice would just simply be you. Be you. Whether somebody tells you at the end of the day, hey, that doesn't work out, that's not a smart move. You know what works. And like with doing research, you can prove whatever you decide to say that you believe in. You can always have research to prove that it's right or wrong. So be you.
I think I would say if this is any foreshadowing of what it's going to be like when we pursue our master's or our PhD or whatever we do in our respective fields, please prioritize your mental health. I think this 8 weeks was definitely a game changer in the mental health conversation, and a lot of like I guess suppressing that imposter syndrome that like if you're not always being productive, then that means that you aren't going to be successful, and just realizing that like when you prioritize your mental health, that will also better benefit the result of whatever it is that you're working at. So just making time for that and not feeling bad about it, but making sure that you're communicating openly and doing the things that you need to do both for yourself and for your group.
I would say again to kind of echo that, take care of yourself. If you need time, take that time. That you can't pour from an empty cup. Like you need to take care of yourself, your mental health. Just, take time for you, and also to be confident in the work that you're doing, because, it can be so hard, like just with the whole research process and everything, to, feel like you maybe like your research isn't going how you want it, or just different things, and so just to be confident in what you're researching. Your voice matters, what you're saying is matters, and your research is necessary.
I think I would add that there is no such thing as too much preparation. There is a lot that goes into SRI, internally and externally, and so I think being cognizant of that is really important going in, as well as I think understanding that I think there's this idea that in order to conduct research from an objective viewpoint, you have to be divorced from it in some way. And I think that that's just not true. I think in order for research to matter, that it has to be connected to your sense of self in some way. And so taking that forward as a positive rather than being, obviously being aware of any internal biases that you have, but also understanding that the identities that you bring to the table can be tools rather than blockades.
In hearing your responses, this connects significantly to the next question from Dr. Julian, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Conducting research can also be revealing not only of a topic, but about oneself as a researcher. What did you learn about yourself as a scholar that you'll bring forward to your next project? So you'll started tapping into that a bit. What did you learn about yourself as a scholar that you'll bring forward into your next project?
For me, it was simply like being uncomfortable. And I learned that being uncomfortable means that you're growing in some way, whether you don't see it at the moment, but you're growing. And I know in research, the whole research process, I was uncomfortable in my situation. But in the end, I feel like I showed myself really well and I was really strong in making sure I conducted and presented to you guys what you asked of me. And so that's what I would say. Just, it's okay being uncomfortable because uncomfortable means you're growing.
Yeah, for me, going off of what Jade said, it was definitely an uncomfortable experience, especially first time meeting my mentor. I was like a nervous wreck. So I definitely think just being able to believe in like the research that I want to do or the things that I'm gonna be passionate about, and knowing that like just what she was saying about just being you, that was something that I was definitely having a hard time at first, because I can just be such a people pleaser where I'm like, oh, I don't know if they understand what I'm saying or if they understand the route that I'm trying to go down, but also like being able to know that if this is something that you have an idea about, for one, like you're in McNair because people already believed in you, and also knowing that like, even if that one mentor or the first person that you meet with may not be the right person for you, don't give up and don't think that that's just not enough, that research that you're passionate about is not going to be something that you can actually do. So just being able to like believe in yourself was something that, and believing in myself was something that I had to definitely grow in. And I think a year from now, oh man, I'm definitely so different. I definitely think I've been growing in just being able to see that creative ideas that come to me doesn't always have to be like a later thing, but the uncomfortability that I am feeling is actually just allowing me to just push forward and see that, oh, okay, I can do this. Like, it is okay that I have this extraordinary idea, don't really know how to do it, but just being able to embrace that process of what it may look like to learn on my own and things like that. So definitely been a difference.
I know for me, I'm one of my biggest, like, I hear this from my professors all the time. They're like, slow down, Malanah. And I'm like, okay, I'll just slow down. But I think over the course of like this whole summer, I finally actually like slowed down and really tried to figure out what I'm trying to say. And because I know what I want to say, but I just need to take that time and like energy and focus to like dig a little deeper and actually like really articulate and really just like really actually sit down with myself and figure out what that is. And just trust myself because it's already there. Because I know that I remember I talked to my mentor and I have an idea and like she'll like rephrase. I'm like, that's exactly what I was trying to say. So then once like I did like my edits over like my edits like on my paper again, my first edit I knew what I was trying to say, but then my second edit I actually like slowed down more, was like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. And then I did it. So it was really just trusting myself and actually not like being like, okay, I'll slow down. No, it's actually slowing down. And then I remember when I was trying to find my topic, my mentor mentioned, Dr. Holan, she mentioned like rather instead of like agreeing with opinions or agreeing with arguments of other scholars or art historians, try to place yourself or try to create an opinion of your own. And for some reason, I don't know why that just didn't click to me. I was just like, oh yeah, I agree with that. Let me see if I can further explore that. It was like, no, think of like, take that what you read, but now apply and see if there's something else you can find in that, but don't actually agree with it, or like you can agree with it, but just take that what you agree with or disagree and try to form your own opinion. I think that right there really helped me when it comes to finding a topic, and really helped me coming to like narrow down topics. I know one of my biggest problems was my topics are always too broad, and I was just like, this is what I want to do. They're like, okay, well, what exactly do you want? Like how they like go a little bit deeper. So, and I think that right there will and has helped me tremendously on my next project. And then going back to just slowing down, whether it's articulating my thoughts fully and taking that time and being patient with myself, and trusting myself to know that what you're trying to say is there. You just gotta trust yourself and be patient and like really focus deeper on like what you're trying to say.
I think something that I learned as a researcher was how chaotic I can be, which is something that's like really, if you know me, you know I'm not really a chaotic person, but it's something that I really enjoyed seeing myself for research because I got so excited about it. Like my thought process would go in so many different ways. And so I think that's like something like toward like, once I got over like this fear of like, oh no, I'm being chaotic, this is a mess, I just started embracing that. And I think for now on, like when I go into research, I'm just gonna like accept it and be like, this is a part of the process. A lot like what Jasmine and other scholars were saying, like how the research process is not linear. I think it's just something that we have to like embrace. And I think that's like something I really learned about myself in this experience.
I think something for me is just knowing that I can handle this process because, you know, like at the start of SRI, I was kind of like, I was already that person looking at, you know, like the ending being like, how am I going to get here? And, you know, just kind of overthinking and overanalyzing and all that different stuff. And so, you know, just this whole process has taught me that I can handle it and that you know, I'm qualified for this. I can do this. And so just that's something that I'll carry with me, you know, just into further research.
I do want to be conscious of time. And so we do have one final question. I'll say it's a final question from Gerald Holmes. Again, giving you all kudos for your presentation. Great job. Please share the library databases and resources that you used for the first time.
Zotero, that is something that was such a blessing in this research. Yeah, when I found out about it, I was like, what? So I was really thankful. It definitely helped me out. And especially just like the mentors, I never knew about research library mentors. So both of those was like amazing just to have to help within this research. And thank y'all so much, all library mentors, because man, I can only imagine what life would be like without them. So thank y'all.
Yes, Zotero definitely seems to be the fan favorite across many scholars. Other resources or databases?
So it's not, I guess it's a resource. My mentor showed me this, this like thing you can do where you go on Google Scholar and say like you pull up your actual article and then it'll show you like a cited section of like other researchers that have also done similar topics. And that was really helpful in my literature review because I was like, I can't find anything else. Like, I've Googled everything in Google Scholar. I'm only getting these set articles. And then she was pulling out all these articles. I'm like, where are you finding those from? So that was really helpful to know that there's like a subset of research that you can find just from one article.
Okay, I don't think I'm hearing any additional resources. I think in general, thank you to library mentors as well as faculty mentors playing a role as resource in showing scholars, you know, just those little tips and tricks and different ways to navigate finding and producing knowledge in their research. And so as we consider time, please scholars continue to look at the chat box. You're seeing folks continue to share their remarks and their thanks to you and the great job that you're doing. Thank you scholars for your time, not only today during the panel, but during summer research and conducting great research. Thank you for your brilliance and thank you for continuing to add to knowledge that we need, conducting research that is needed in your respective disciplines. And so if you haven't done so already, I think we could give ourselves a round of applause. And if I can ask our attendees to do some virtual applause, thank you. And as we wrap up, if I can have you all as scholars perhaps share a few words of thanks, if there's any folks that you want to give thanks regarding your research and your research process. And so I'll go by order of my screen. We'll start with Jessica.
I just want to do a special thanks to my faculty mentor, Dr. Bouchard, and my library mentor, Jenny Dale. They were amazing throughout this whole process, and I honestly think it was all possible because of them. So.
Good deal. Cody.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Carla, for the support and everything through your virtual office hours and overseeing the whole process, as well as Maggie Murphy, who was an excellent resource in terms of, for me, I know I had never hand-cited anything before this process, and so Maggie Murphy just really was beneficial in helping navigate that whole process, as well as Jean, who oversaw Dr. Jean Rogers, who I really enjoyed his input on my paper.
Thank you. Jade.
So I would like to shout out my cohort, specifically Nadira, Zaria, Jackie, Leanne. It's a few other women. I forgot their names at the moment, but I want to thank them so much for keeping me uplifted during the whole process. Ariana Watkins, she's from last year's cohort. She came in, saved my life completely. And then Shariah, she's from the Writing Center. And she was the first person to read my paper and actually compliment it and give me words of encouragement. So I thank her for allowing me to continue the process.
Thank you. Kiara.
I would just like to say thank you to you, Dr. Kara, and Maggie. It's been a long process, and I was down and out for quite a time because I just got so frustrated with, changing my topics and things of that nature. But y'all really encouraged me and motivated me to keep on going. And look at this, now I'm here. So I just want to thank y'all so much for the encouragement and believing in me, even when I didn't feel or believe in myself. So thank y'all so much, so much.
Thank you. Jasmine.
Yes, I want to thank you, Kara. Definitely want to thank Dr. Jensen, my mentor, and Melody Rude, my library mentor. Both have just been powerhouses in me and my stress and, like you were saying, frustration, and just continuing to be supportive and, like, you know, letting me know that I can handle it and getting me through with positive words of affirmation and really like guiding me in the right direction. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Rejani.
I'd like to give a huge shout out to my faculty mentor, Dr. Noah Morissette, and my library mentor, Jenny Dale, who literally, I don't know how I would have gotten through this process without them. Just for all their incredible help and, you know, their resources, from me emailing them at 5 a.m. sometimes, and, you know, just affirming, you know, the research that I'm doing and, you know, just telling me that I can, you know, even when I'm unsure about things, that, you know, it's okay and that I'm going to get through it and that I can do it. So just a huge shout out.
Thank you. And Malanah.
So I just want to give like a huge, like amazing, huge thank you to my faculty mentor, Dr. Holian. I just want to thank her for her patience and just her honesty and just all her guidance and like, and I honestly believe like this whole process, like I feel more confident in my ability to research, and now I feel like I have a great base in like for future research, like for years to come. And I feel like that's all thanks to Dr. Holian. So I'm just so appreciative to actually, and this is what I want to do. So she really like validated like research is what I want to do. And like, she gave me those steps and like tools and like tips and then she never really, and I never felt pressured to like think of a topic, pressure to like have my like, we did pressure on anything. So I had that really freedom. So I just want to thank her on that. And also my library mentor, Maggie Murphy, she was really helpful in just like getting the books from the library, which I truly honestly just like didn't know existed. So like, thank you for that. And just going above and beyond to just helping whenever I needed. So faculty mentor, library mentor, just 1,000 thank yous and so grateful.
Awesome. Well, this is it, y'all. Once again, thank you all. Thank you again to everyone that you all mentioned. Thank you to your respective communities, whether it's other scholars. Thank you to your, you know, perhaps your family and friends in the background that may be observing you on this call or just play a role in your success throughout conducting your research over the summer. But great job. And congratulations, you're done with your panel. So good job, all. And I will officially stop the recording now. Thank you again.